Imagine you're inside a Jewish ghetto during the Second World War. There's lack of food, there's lack of medical care, people around you are dying. And then you hear that you be put on transport to a certain death. What do you do then? Exactly, you revolt. This here is the story of the Bialystok Ghetto Uprising, the second biggest ghetto uprising that took place during the Second World War, fairly unknown. Stay tuned. Bialystok had a troublesome history, to say the least. It was part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, but the state got carved up by the Prussians, the Russians and the Austrians. It was now part of Prussia, but was later transferred to the Russian Empire. Flash forward to the First World War. The Germans, they captured the city, but later, at the end of the First World War, handed over to the Poles. Then in the summer of 1920, the Bolsheviks seized the city, but were soon driven out, and thus Bialystok was part of the Second Polish Republic. And then, 1939, the Nazis invade Poland from the west, and the Soviets do so from the east. The Germans, they captured Bialystok, but handed over to the Soviets, since the city was in the Soviet sphere of influence. June 22nd, 1941, the Germans launched Operation Barbarossa, and by the end of that month, Bialystok fell to the German soldiers. From the get-go, they show their destructive nature towards the races they deem inferior. 20,000 Jews are put inside the synagogue, which is then lit on fire, and the remaining Jews are interned in the Bialystok ghetto. Anti-Semitism in Bialystok was nothing new. In 1906, the Bialystok pogrom took place, in which over 80 Jews died, and the same amount got wounded. Why were the Jews put into ghettos? Now, putting the Jews in secluded ghettos is basically a solution that meets the demands of both the expulsionists and the attritionists, because the Jews get expulsed from normal society, they get into these secluded ghettos, but because of the abysmal conditions, many would die there. The ghettos became a holding pen for a much more ambitious deportation plan, the evacuation of the Jews to Madagascar. This was the black hole for Jews that had received the most attention in Germany and throughout Europe before the war. It was the solution that Hitler had suggested to Polish leaders in 1938, who could not understand how he meant to combine it with war. A victory over France, German leaders hoped, would open up Madagascar, which was a French colonial possession. Having defeated Poland, Hitler returned to his basic scenario for the war: remove the French threat from the west to avoid the strategic problem of encirclement, and then attack the Soviet Union to achieve the war's aim. Lebensraum. After German troops entered Paris on June 14, 1940, Eichmann sent an envoy to look for the documentation of the 1936 Polish-French discussions about Madagascar. The new French government, established in Vichy, supported a Madagascar deportation, but shipping millions of people from Europe to the Indian Ocean was a project that would require the approval and indeed support of the British Empire. And when France fell, Britain remained at war. Early 1943, the first wave of deportations to Camp Treblinka started. These were part of Action Reinhardt. Mid-August that year, the Germans planned the final liquidation of the Bialystok ghetto. For this, they were assisted by Eastern European auxiliary troops, Troniki men, which were so-called Hiwis. On the night of the 16th of August 1943, hundreds of Polish Jews were interned in the Bialystok ghetto. They started an uprising. They were led by Mordechai Tenenbaum and Daniel Moszkowicz. They had very limited weapons: one machine gun, a bunch of rifles, pistols, and Molotov cocktails. But nevertheless, they fought. Unsurprisingly, the uprising was crushed pretty swiftly. SS commander Odilo Globopnik sent a tank to suppress the revolt and set fire to the ghetto. Jewish leaders committed suicide, and the following day, the deportations went according to plan. However, some isolated pockets fought on for several days. Around 10,000 Jews were sent to various concentration camps. Now, a few Jewish resistance fighters, they managed to break out of the ghetto and fled into the forest. And there they joined resistance organizations such as the Armia Krajowa. But we should make no illusions, because the numbers, they say it all. And the numbers are just outright tragic. Bialystok had around 60,000 Jews. Several hundred survived the Second World War. The Bialystok Ghetto Uprising can be compared with the biggest ghetto uprising that took place during the Second World War, and this was the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising that took place a few months earlier. And in the end, it didn't change anything. Both uprisings were crushed fairly swiftly. But they made a stance. You know, these Jews had a choice. They could die on their knees in the gas chamber, or they could die with their chin up and a weapon in their hand. And the Jews of the Bialystok ghetto chose for the latter option. This topic is fairly dark, but it needs to be covered. And if you want to learn more about dark topics like these, and you want to learn more about the Warsaw Uprising or the Holocaust itself, you can click right here. Let me know your thoughts of it. I find it fairly depressing to talk about it, and also to imagine that this ghetto used to be here, although not much of it is left. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Do leave a comment and feel free to share. Thank you.